All right, we're now recording, we're live. Thank you so much, Auditor General Godana,
Thank you.
for just allowing us to have this time with you. We are in conversation with the Auditor General of the Office of the Federal Auditor General of Ethiopia. And quite an amazing time set to be able to engage you. It's amazing in the sense that I know from the moments that I've been to Ethiopia, your side has been doing a lot of work in the disaster area as far as audits are concerned. And today we just want to get a recollection from you as we are trying to move forward and focus how we are going to approach the current pandemic, the COVID coronavirus in the coming days as far as the audits are concerned. But look, we are looking back and we're saying in 2018, your side performed two notable disaster-related audits. One was on the government's performance on protection and control of non-communicable diseases. And the other one was on the government's disaster recovery and rehabilitation performance. Two questions come out of that, sir. What triggered you to perform such audits? And what were your findings and recommendations to the government of Ethiopia?
Yeah, thank you, Edmund, for that question. And actually, when we choose our topic for performance audit each year, we look at issues, those issues of either public outcry or those issues of high significance to the community, if how that issue has been handled is reviewed, and maybe gaps are identified and recommendations are brought forward. Those are the basic approach usually we follow each year when we conduct performance audit. But for the 2018, one of the issues which triggered, for example, the issues related to the non-communicable disease is these non-communicable diseases like cancer, like hypertension, like diabetes, and like mental health are increasing at a very fast pace in the country, and we have never heard about some of them before. And when people pass away, we hear suddenly they have been passed away because of these diseases. And even deep in rural areas where probably the lifestyle is different from the urban. So when we brainstorm, this was the issue which have come to our minds, and we thought if we conduct how the Ministry of Health, which is an arm of government which is responsible for the public health, is handling and addressing these issues, and probably if we identify gaps and maybe come up with recommendations, maybe that would definitely, we thought, would add value into improving the public health management in the country. And I think that's why we have started to look into that issue. And there were significant gaps which we have identified. There are policy issues, strategy issues, and legal framework issues, and the management issues, the actual implementation issues. This is a federal country. This is a federal country, but at the national level, normally we set policies. The Ministry of Health developed policies and also strategy to implement those policies. There are certain areas which we have identified policies were not developed for some of these non-communicable diseases. And there are areas where policies have been developed, but proper strategies were not really put in place. And there are areas where policies and strategies are there, but there is no proper legal framework which have been developed to assist to properly implement those policies and strategies. And above all, as I say, this is a federal country. There is a similar structure at the regional state level and to the grassroots level. But there has to be proper coordination between these different levels of health institutions working on the public health, the federal, the regional, and maybe zonal and district level, and even the institutions below that level. And there are gaps which we have identified in terms of coordination of among these different layers of health institutions. This is one of the gaps which you have identified. And the other basic important issues is, as a policy, Ethiopia pursues prevention. Prevention is a focus of health policy in Ethiopia than the treatment itself. So if prevention policy have to work, you should really create maybe some of these things comes from the lifestyle, the lifestyle of the people. So awareness creation is very important, and we have identified that is lacking, and proper awareness creation is not has not been conducted at various levels, and to make the people aware of these non-communicable diseases, which could have been easily avoided if proper care is taken. And in fact, what also goes with this one is the incorporation of some of this non-communicable disease related issues into the curriculum system. If we incorporate those ones in the curriculum system, and we deliver those at from the elementary to the university level, I think, because if you take Ethiopia as a country, we have about 30 million population in the school system right now. 30 million is a huge population, and if that is incorporated in the curriculum system, which is lacking actually, which we have identified as a gap, it could have really hampered or reduced significantly the risk of this days arising out of this non-communicable diseases. And for example, if you take the mental health issues is really the mental health issue, the cancer and the diabetes and the blood pressure, which are now becoming one of the major killers. You see, if you could have educated your people, you could have reduced the risk, and that is one of the issues which we have identified as a gap. And eventually, one of the major issues which we have identified is the access, for example, for the cancer, particularly for women. It is affecting women very significantly, and different types of cancers. And the access is a serious issue, which we have identified, because I think, as I said, the reason which have triggered the audit is what we observe, what we see, what we hear in the public arena. And when we look at the cancer, there are very limited cancer treatment centers in the country. And there is an attempt by the government to expand at least these centers. Basically, until very recently, it was concentrated only in Addis Ababa, the capital. But now the government is trying to establish some of these centers in the regions, in certain geographical areas. But the development of the infrastructure, the equipping of those centers, and the development of the personnel, which will be treating those centers, really are not going hand in hand. That is one of the major issues which we have identified, because this is a major risk which is growing now in the country. Unless a swift measure is taken immediately, I think the risk could be, and its cost would be very high for the nation and for the people of the country. And I think those are how we have triggered this audit of the public non-communicable diseases. On the disaster recovery, we have the institution, the agency or the commission called Disaster Risk Preparedness and Management Commission. And there is a preparedness side, and there is a management side as well of the disaster. So we wanted to test really how, because there are such different disasters which are taking place in the country, and we wanted to test whether they are very well prepared, and even when the risk happens, their capability or effectiveness in managing those risks. Well, there are policies in place. There are policies in place. There are certain institutions which are in place, but there are gaps which we have identified. One of the major gaps is the coordination. When disaster happens, there are, similar to the health institutions working on the health, there are different institutions working on the disaster prevention and management issues, the regional institutions, the federal institutions as well. And the coordination is really one of the major gaps which we have identified. There are mechanisms in place, but in fact, there are policies and strategies in place. But one of the issues which we have picked up regarding policy and procedure is the lack of continuous update of those policies and strategies, because they have to make them current and workable in current situation, and that is probably one of the gaps which we have identified. The second issue is, as I said, the coordination among different stakeholders, from the federal to local and district levels, and but this coordination issue is sometimes severe when it comes to disaster response. in the disaster response areas, what we have seen is sometimes, you see, yeah, there are food items and non-food items which they have to deliver in response to the disaster. There are stores, strategic stores in strategic locations, and you see the delivery of this necessary supplies for the disaster response, particularly food and non-food items. There are sometimes what we have identified is it's not based on really the study, the real study or demand of the situation which has happened in particular areas, and sometimes they deliver something which is not really important, and they miss something which is very critical, and that is one of the issues which we have identified. And the second issue is in fact the store management issue, these strategic stores for which they use for disaster response, and they are not using technology very much. And if they could have used technology and in both identifying risks and really designing the preparedness mechanism and the response strategies, I think technology could reduce the damage and that could have probably taken place, and also it could reduce resource. It could also enhance effectiveness. It could also reduces costs as well, and those are the gaps which we have identified, and we thought government need to take certain actions to improve on those critical to disaster related audits. Even you see, we have even attempted this year now to do the preparedness for the COVID-19 before just the case was reported in the country. And we have tried to set up a team, but we were not successful. But because of the fear, that didn't go very well. And I think the audit which we have carried out, those two are, I hope would have added value to the government and the people of Ethiopia as well. That's what I think I see.
Well, thank you so much, AG. I'm picking up some very good inputs from you, just from these audits that you did a little while back in 2018, but have certainly helped your side to prepare better for the future. And I like the sense that you're even talking about the confidence which your side got to even do a proactive preparedness approach for COVID-19. Of course, in spite and despite of what happened in the attempt. But I do pick up also, AG, that the approach that you took, it is one that is not only very inclusive, but it's also one that is based in knowledge, an accumulated amount of knowledge, because you're bringing it out that we need to know our countries very well, what is affecting them, how often it affects them, and how best to respond to that. And based on that, you're able to do a systematic approach to coming up with the audit that you did on disaster. You touched on three areas, Auditor General, that are very dear to me. Of course, this is from your findings and the recommendations that you gave to your government. One area was on technology usage, to say we need to improve more and use technology wiser in approaching these things and responding to them. And then the other one was the question of gender. I mean, any country knows that their female population is not only the foundation, but it's also the strength of their countries. And then you also talked about the school curriculum that's touching on the youth. And we also know that the youth are the custodians of the future itself. Now, Auditor General, I'm excited to know, how did your government respond to your recommendations? Have you managed to get a chance to do a follow-up to see how well these have been since implemented? Because it is key.
Yeah, we have conducted the hearing on these two performance audits at the Parliament have taken up both of them. They have conducted the hearing. And yeah, we haven't carried out the follow-up audit, but as I said, the hearing on these two reports have been carried out. And the ministry has those findings. And I hope they will improve on those issues. But as an auditor now, I cannot say this has been implemented, this has not been implemented, because the proper follow-up audit need to be carried out. As a policy, what we pursue is we usually do the follow-up audit after 3 years. We give them 3 years actually to implement, because some of the recommendations in the performance audit will take much more time to effectively implement, and maybe take more resources. And for that reason, we give them 3 years. But we require them to submit the action plan, and the Parliament to conduct hearing on those topics. They have submitted the action plan. That is the first step in the implementation of the recommendations which we have put forward. And the hearing has been conducted in the Parliament on those two performance audits. And what we will do is probably in 2021, we carry out the follow-up audit to evaluate and review whether our recommendation has been properly implemented, and it really yielded any value in improving the performance and the issues which we have recommended to toward which action need to be taken. That one we need to see.
AG, just a brief follow-up from my side. And in terms of what Edmond has asked, I particularly like the idea of incorporating awareness of these diseases in the curriculum. And just briefly to share my experience, I had a trainee accountant who had a mental disease, and it was so severe at that point that he had already lost 2 jobs before he came to work at the office as a trainee. And we contacted his family, and because his family was not, they were from the rural areas, they were not even aware. And according to them, this was the most brilliant guy. And as you know, most of them are quite brilliant as it is. But he didn't get the attention that he needed to get, because the family was not aware of what are the the triggers, or what are the signs of somebody that has a mental disease, and how do they then react or respond to somebody with such a disease. So I would imagine that if this is included in the curriculum, it will help, it will assist even the children when they see their parents falling sick, then they know that these are the symptoms of an illness, so I need to call some help. So I like that quite a lot. But in terms of the follow-up question, you also mentioned that you responded to the citizens' outcry in terms of these diseases. Do you specifically have a method which we use to collect the information that says this is the outcry of the citizens, and this is what we need to follow up and include in our audit? Is there any specific way in which you collect that information?
Yeah. Thank you very much. For the public outcry, usually we monitor media where people express about the services, okay? Media is one source, definitely. Number two, I think Edmond has raised a very important issue. When we pick this audit, for example, about the mental health issue, we have, until very recently, we just have one hospital in Addis Ababa. And people have to come from all over the world, all over the country to Addis Ababa for the treatment. Even sometimes after the disease go to the end where it could be very difficult to really treat that person. And now we have in this country, we have about 30,000 health extension agents in rural areas, 30,000, and in a basic health infrastructure, where we station them in very near to health, what we call health post, which is more or less focusing on the awareness creation. But if we properly really use those infrastructures and those, if we really educate these people to really identify some of the symptoms of the mental health issues, and really assist them to maybe support them to really create awareness in the community, I think we would have significantly reduced risk if you act at the earlier stage for any disease. The cost and the recovery and the possibility of healing is really very faster and higher. Look, for the mental health, as I said, we have just one facility in Addis Ababa. And now there is a strategy. There is a strategy to roll out some of these health facilities, but was not happening. And this is the knowledge which Edmund have talked about. And we also use that one as well, the knowledge. The knowledge is very important, what's going on in the country, what's happening. For the cancer treatment is also similar, because we have never heard about the cancerous issue, the deaths because of the blood pressure, the diabetes in rural areas. I'm a rural area born guy, and you see now this thing is growing, so those knowledge is very important to pick this issue. I think to add value, we need to understand what's going on in the country, what is available and what's not available. And that's one thing. apart from that, we are also part of the community, and we have families and friends, and we also use those knowledge to pick some of the issues which are of great importance to the nation. If we identify, pick up those issues and study and maybe identify gaps and come up with certain recommendation.
This is great. Look, AG, as I'm listening also to your responses, and I'm linking them back to some of the findings that you had, I can't relent, but just accept that it seems as if your side has mastered this ability to be able to track through and touch many various sectors of the country. And in doing so, you are able to interrogate and understand policies for the different aspect of the public financial management cycle of your country. And now when I'm looking at it, I look back and say, look, at the end of the day, even though the SAI is an independent institution, the SAI does not exist as an island. And as such, I'm sure there are some areas where you then need to coexist and work with other sister institutions within the government state machinery itself. Now, tell me, how have you managed to strengthen the collaboration with some of these sister institutions, and how have you managed to even preserve your independence, even though you have to collaborate with them, especially during the fight against COVID-19?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that important question. Definitely, state institutions cannot be completely and 100% independent of the state institutions. We are independent, but we have to coexist with the state institutions, and we need to collaborate with state institutions, different state institutions. Look, during this, we want to maintain our independence only for the purpose of, you see, avoiding or preventing encroachment into our rights, our missions, our constitutional rights. We want to preserve our independence from that encroachment. Otherwise, I think preserving that is very key if you have to really effectively operate as the Auditor General. That is my experience. But it's still, it's very important you deliver. You don't simply talk about independence, but it's very important you deliver. If you deliver and courage enough, okay, courage enough, not courage enough in the sense that you don't have to fear. Look, in most of the jurisdictions, probably Auditor Generals have terms of office. And so if that term is given to them, and the Auditor Generals have to be, for me, courageous enough to properly discharge and deliver on what they have, you know, after the appointment, take out of office in the parliament, before the parliament, and meaning before 100 million people of this country through their representative, and I have to deliver that, and that is very key. And leading by example is also very important. You cannot be really a person if you cannot be an institution of integrity, and if you don't deliver what you say, if you don't really the kind of institution and people that you talk about, nobody will take you seriously. You could report, you could do everything, but I think you need to be very serious when it comes to the audit. And during audit, during media engagement, during the hearing, you don't have to be, you don't have to look like a very weak person. You have to be very strong and a person of a person and institution of ability to deliver. That is key. Once you do that, I think cooperation and collaboration will not be, for me, will not be difficult. You will be trusted. Trust is very important, okay? You will have a trust of the institution to which you are reporting, the parliament in our case. You will have a trust of the people, like as a credible institution. And you will have a trust of even the donor community to build your capacity. Because if you are serious enough, and people will come up with resource to support you, to identify your gaps and bridge those gaps and deliver better. That is very important. So I think if you achieve these things, still you can work with all institutions, because you can work with any agency, with any ministry, with any institution, call them by their name, any institution. So collaboration will not be a difficult thing. For me, for the last 12 years, I'm in the office, and I think I have achieved that collaboration easily. I have never compromised on a single issues, and so that probably will earn you respect, and which you will use as a capital to maybe lobby for the resource as well, and get what you want from the rest of the institutions. And that is one thing. The other thing is the image issue, the image meaning the perception of the audit office. You see, most of the institutions look at the auditors as fault finders always. And although it would be very difficult to convince everybody that you are not going there to find fault and whatever, but still, what we have been doing is we have been saying, look, we are coming to your institution to identify certain gaps, which probably as a head of institution, you may not, for different reason, identify them. Because if somebody comes from outside, the way that outsider reviews an institution and the way the insider reviews the institution is different. Mm-hmm. And we have that capital to bring to you, so that when we identify those gaps, it's not really to hurt you. It's just to enable you to improve your performance. That is what we try to convey to them, and try to convince them, so that they, instead of repulsive, we try to turn them into cooperative body. And also, we until, for example, I submit my report to the parliament, I accommodate everybody. Our auditors, this is the policy of the institution. The auditors need to accommodate them. So they feel now comfortable when they deal with us, and when that cooperation comes. Of course, we are auditors, but we never compromise on our mission. But still, we try to make them cooperate with us through fair approach. During the COVID, I think we have scaled back our audit operation generally because of the current situation. We have scaled back, and we have suspended basically the audit, the regular audit, whether that is performance or regular financial audit. And what we are conducting is some of the special audits, which are very requested by different entities. And those ones, because of the urgency nature of them, we are just handling mainly those ones. But for the rest, I think we have scaled, we have somehow suspended the audit work during the COVID. And but we have reviewed the situation now, how we can proceed. This is now going to be a new normal, and it's going to be a challenge. There's going to be a challenge even ahead of us. Although we have suspended at this stage, we are planning probably to commence the audit maybe around in the middle of September. But there are different issues now which we need to address. The social distancing issues, the challenge to ensure social distancing issues very, very critical, because the office issue, the transportation of auditors from place to place, and maybe the input things we can supply some of them, but it's a challenge. And this all challenge is coming because technology is not very much used in this country, particularly for the financial audit, and even for the performance audit. For the performance audit, we can use some of the soft version of the document, but for the regularity audit, it's a must. We need to go to some of the hard copies, and the challenge is ahead of us. But we are discussing with all the audit institutions. We are engaging them to prepare for that, literally all of them, particularly in preparing an audit room which will allow you to adhere to the principle of social distancing. And some of these offices, maybe they themselves, they don't have sufficient office space. And even if they have sufficient office space before, now they may need more space because of the social distancing. Under normal circumstances, you may have sufficient space. Now, you may be forced to have a double of that space, which is not in existence, and which is going to be a challenge ahead of us. And for us, for the audit as well. And we are discussing on these issues how we can hammer them out. And yeah, these are the kind of cooperation we are doing with the different institutions. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Look, Macy, I'm getting a very clear message from the Auditor General here. And he is saying that independence does not mean isolation.
No.
And he has addressed, I think, one key issue that we've been discussing throughout Africa, really, when we're talking about the independence of the SAIs, how do we approach gaining that independence and keeping it? And usually people, they always gravitate towards the question of lobbying and lobbying. I like the new way of thinking, or maybe not new way of thinking, but the way of thinking that the AG has introduced. To say, yes, you can talk about independence, but probably the best way of preserving and getting your independence is to be a side that delivers. Because if you are not delivering, then really what do you want the independence for? You need to deliver, you need to lead by example, and probably most importantly, you need to be, as he says, accommodative, but without compromising.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. I hear him saying, take your auditees along. Don't treat them like you are dictating to them, but take them along so that they understand why you are there. What value are you bringing? Important.
Well, I think what has happened here, the stage has been set for me to launch my last question for the Auditor General. I mean, he's talking about a very strategic reapproach to his audits, whereby he was focusing on special audits due to their agency, but then there's been a lot of preparation again on the ground to make sure that the social distancing parameters of doing things in a new world, in a new way, so to say, is being preserved. Now, AG Ethiopia, last I checked, and this is changing in some cases day by day, hey? Ethiopia is the 7th hardest hit countries in Africa by coronavirus. And recently, Ethiopia received US 71 million and 250 state-of-the-art ventilators from the United States of America. Countries all over the world have been giving and receiving donations in both cash and kind as a way of fighting COVID. Now, towards good governance and accountability in your country, please, Auditor General, can you articulate to us what are your plans to actually react to the various donations, both cash and kind, so that Ethiopia is able to use them in a way that they are meant to be used, really? How are you going to respond, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Edmund. And there is maybe at the initial stage, we have been receiving donations from different organizations, and the Ministry of Finance was simply dispersing to the agencies the usual bank account, and that is going to be a challenge because look, if OFAG has a certain bank account and a COVID a resource specifically allocated for COVID is simply dispersed to that same account because of the fungibility of money, you cannot segregate and do that. Or it could make the audit very difficult. But from July 1 onward, special accounts have been opened in all agencies for the COVID resources. There is, by the way, donations coming from the donor community. There are donations which are coming from the citizens and even the public servant. If, for example, the OFAG management have donated their 1 month's salary to this account, there is a central account which is established for these donations, and the system has been established. Okay, and we are prepared to some of these resources have been dispersed to the regions. Some of these resources have been dispersed to different agencies, but we are prepared to audit this resource. We have allocated a sufficient resource, I mean, the audit staff for this purpose, okay? And when we begin our audit, This is one of the focus areas because there are resources, as I said, coming from the donor community, which they are they have even put in their aid memo or the agreement document that OFAC should audit the proper implementation or utilization of these resources. But there is also citizens' money which is going to the account which I was mentioning about. And I think this is going to be a huge challenge for us. And it could have been better, as I said before, if we could have done a real-time audit so that we could have assisted them to rectify, the problems earlier. But we are coming now after they have spent some of these monies, and I could have done a real-time audit like Sierra Leone have done real-time audit during the Ebola time, and I think it's like thinking about that we have put a team together even to see whether the government is properly prepared to prevent the cases being imported into the country when the COVID-19 case, before COVID-19 cases were reported in this country. But we could have done that. But as I said, we are prepared for the, after the disbursement audit, not the real-time audit.
Excellent. Thank you so much, AG. Once again, the audit office always approaching everything from a very systematic way. I like the fact that you're already picking up the risks around the fungibility of cash itself, whilst of course the resources are being made ready to go in there and do a post event audit. I appreciate the fact that the audit office is actually coming out and bringing out its vulnerabilities to say, look, we could have done this better. We could have done a real-time audit. But of course, that's not to say we're giving up. No, the audit office is not giving up. They're coming and they're bringing some of their best auditors to look at the post events audit approach. And absolutely, I wish you well, Auditor General. I mean, I've interacted with some of your audit staff. They are some of the best audit staff that we have in Africa as far as performing quality audits are concerned. I do not have any other follow-up questions, but I want to leave it to Macy now with a very grateful heart from my end. Thank you, AG.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much, AG. This has been a very refreshing and fruitful hour with you. I don't know if you have anything that, the last words that you'd want to say to our listeners or to share with our listeners before we close the session. Otherwise, I might just be tempted to ask you another question if you don't share your last words.
Maybe what I just want to re-emphasize the importance of really adding value at the right time. I may be my fellow Auditors Generals and audit community and the AFROSAI-E probably to look into how we can really do the real time in these scenarios. You know, there is a say in our culture which says the dog has barked after the hyena has gone. And I think it doesn't really, yes, for the accountability, still we can hold people accountable. But as I said, the new if we want to collaborate, and if we want to assist our stakeholders, our auditors, and we bring them along with us, I think that issue of real-time audit in events like COVID, events like a disaster, and are very important. And also, I encourage, I really appreciate that you have picked these two audits and wanted me to explain why we have picked them and we have carried out. I encourage the rest of audit communities also to focus on such issues of high value. And thank you very much, Mr. Wise. Yeah.
Thank you so much, AG, and that's the emphasis that I really expected from you, and thank you very much for meeting my expectations. I do appreciate